Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalimanatosmi. Laye sambodhayet chittam vikshiptam shamayet punaha sakashayam vijaniyat samapraptam na chalayet. Om. As you all know, we are in chapter 3, the Vibhuti Yoga. We looked at the last 3 limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga, that is Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. So Dhyana, Dharana and Samadhi, and especially Samadhi, is the highest state of meditation that one can reach. And it is in Samadhi that a person truly experiences peace of mind. And in the reason why in Samadhi, that is followed by Dharana, that is focusing our mind on one single object. We talked quite elaborately on Dharana, and that Dharana changing into Dhyana where it is unbroken. In Dharana there can be breaks, but then in Dhyana it is Ekatanata, it is unbroken. And then you go into total absorption Samadhi, and we will say that Samadhi is the highest state of meditation, and we identify that state by an experience of Manashanti. So the question arises, how can, when the mind is focused on a single object and it gets into Samadhi, how can it translate into Manashanti? Because one could be an intellectual approach where you invest your buddhi into one single object and then continuous flow of the awareness into that one single object, and of course you forget that you are also there. So that in Samadhi the exact thing is that only the object remains. Even your own, the subject who is in Samadhi is also disappears from awareness, and hence something is lost in this process. What is lost? It is the asmita is lost. There is the object, of course, is completely present, but the ego, which is the sense of I, since asmita is not there, asmita is the trigger for ragadvesha, avinivesha, and eventually the cause for disturbance of the mental peace. In Samadhi, we experience Manashanti. The main reason is that there is no asmita. Therefore, when even self-consciousness is lost, that I am there is lost, we are said to be in the state of Samadhi. This we see not only in Yoga Shastra, but also we see in Upanishads. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad talks about it, the Kathopanishad talks about it, and then Yoga Shastra also asserts the same thing. So there is a uniformity and consistency in all the Shastras that Samadhi is the means for getting absolute peace of mind. But this is not similar to sleep. The reason is, in sleep, there is no awareness at all. There is no awareness of even the object is not there. In Sushupti, in deep sleep, object is also not there. And therefore it is not a yogic state. Whereas in Samadhi state, the awareness of the object being there and the subject, the observer also is dissolved, and that state is a highly desirable state. But all the Upanishads and Yoga Shastras, all of them assert that such a state of samadhi can be achieved only when a sequential practice is done. We cannot simply jump and say, I'm going to get into samadhi, I'm going to pick up an object for meditation, and I will lose myself in that. So the Upanishads and the Yoga Shastra, all of them say that you go systematically, starting from yama, move on to niyama, then pranayama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. You have to go through in a sequence. So that is the present understanding of the sutras that we have so far studied. So the fourth sutra says, Trayam ekatra samyamaha, when dharana, dhyana and samadhi are all directed towards the same object, that state is called samyama. So, samyama is a means. Once again, it is not the end. Because remember, the end is for us to establish in Purusha. Therefore, everything that there are obstacles to establish ourselves in Drashtaswarupe Avasthanam, please note, that is our primary purpose. By controlling the Chitta Vritti, we have to establish in Drashtaswarupe Avasthanam in the nature of the seer. And these are all obstacles that we have got to remove. Number of obstacles. So therefore, samyama is the first serious practice of the yogi. And what does samyama consist in? It consists in two things. One is, it must first of all, we must have the knowledge of the object itself. So samyama has got part number one. It is to have the knowledge of the object. And second thing is, we have to gain control over that object. These two things should happen. So let's take one example. Suppose we say, we are going to exercise indriya samyama. That is, I'm going to take up one sense organ. And I'm going to take complete charge of that sense organ. Say, my seeing. Because the most powerful sense organ is our eyes. It is what we see. Because that's the most disturbing, positively or negatively, it is the most disturbing of all the senses. So, let us say we want to take control on our indriya of sight. So, we must have a thorough knowledge of the nature of our indriya, the sight. All the individual components of the indriya has to be known. In other words, what is the purpose of my sight? So it absorbs, it takes it falls on an object and then perceives form. And because it perceives form and reports it to mind, it is going to generate ragadvesha. And it is also going to generate me to be separate from the object of observation. Like that, the yogi will sit in contemplation. And now we must just use in samyama the three-step process, that is dharana, dhyana and samadhi. So let us take an example of how the various components of an object have got to be controlled. Each part of the object has to be controlled by means of dharana. And then we must introduce dhyana. And then finally we must absorb ourselves into samadhi. So let us say we are driving. And when we are driving, what are all the objects that have to be controlled? We have to use our hands to control the steering wheel. And then we have got to have our feet toggling between accelerator and the brake. Therefore, when you hold your steering wheel steadily, it is steering wheel dharana. Then when your foot is on the accelerator, it is accelerator dharana. The mind must have the dhyana or the object, that is the road. So dharana must be supported by the dhyana of where we are going. And then the first foot must have dharana on the brake also. Thus you will see there are several chains of dharana and dhyana that have to operate simultaneously. Our hands must have dharana on the steering wheel. Our feet must be ready for using the accelerator or the brake. There must be dharana of our feet on the brake or the accelerator. It is only when several of these chains they achieve total control and the mind is having the dhyana of where we are going, then we have got acquired a samyama on the car. Similarly, once the samyama on the car is achieved, then what happens? Our mind becomes free from hands steering wheel. Our mind becomes free from foot accelerator, etc. And therefore, trayam ekatra. When the body, our hands, feet, etc. are perfectly in its dharana, that is, it is holding on to the object. And the mind is also participating in dhyana, and you are going in the exact way in which you have to go, trayam ekatra. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi have actually come together. So that's a very simple example. But when we go into something deeper, for example, on certain other samyamas, they are a little more challenging. So what does... Mhm. Yes. So chitta vritti nirodha happens in samadhi. That is why samadhi is where when asmita is removed, and asmita leads to the removal of raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, then where is chitta vritti? The chitta vritti is focused only on one object. There is no chitta vritti at all. There is no vritti santati. You remember I used the terminology in our last class, vritti santati. That is one vritti leading to the next vritti followed by another vritti. So in samadhi, actually there is no chitta vritti fluctuations. Chitta fluctuations are not there. Yes. Will still be there, yes. So that is why the dharana, dhyana, samadhi chain has to be, as we will see in the next sutra, it has to be applied into bhumi. So it is still, our project is not over. Our project is just, we are trying to understand what samadhi is. And this samyama has got to applied into the bhumis. So that's where the scripture is in the next sutra. It is going to introduce us saying, no, it is not enough if you have achieved dhyana, dharana, samadhi. It's not enough if you have achieved samyama. It has to be applied into the bhumi. So we'll see. Unless we apply it into every bhumi, then only chitta vritti nirodha is possible. And then, of course, we get into all the vibhutis entering and then hijacking the whole process. So what we have achieved so far in samadhi is, in samyama, there is sattva shuddhi. to answer your question. So in what context I am using the word sattva? Not in the context of virtue, value, which Upanishad talks about. In Yoga Shastra, sattva is equated to buddhi. So sattva shuddhi means buddhi shuddhi. So that is the intellect becomes transparent. The biggest opacity for knowing the Purusha is, it starts with the prapancha, one layer of opaqueness. Then there is a second layer of opaqueness, which is our own sharira, gross body. Then we have the third layer, which is the antahkarana. And in the antahkarana, the most difficult layer to break is our intellect. So how to achieve the transparency of the buddhi without losing buddhi? In sushupti, in sleep state, we have lost the buddhi. It's not available at all. Whereas in samadhi, buddhi is available, and it achieves in samadhi, in samyama basically, more than samadhi, in trayamekatra, where all the dharana, dhyana and samadhi, all the three are there, a degree of transparency comparable to that of Purusha is achieved. So Purusha's transparency is a pure sattva-guna, prakasha, that is all. Whereas in the state of samyama, where there is one pointed concentration, that is dharana, then there is one pointed meditation, that is dhyana, and where the sense of individuality, sense of observer is lost, which is samyama, then what we have achieved is we have made the buddhi nearly as transparent as the Purusha. That is what we have achieved. But it is not as perfect as Purusha, and therefore chitta-vrittis will continue to arise. And hence the scripture has got to continue to teach us. Otherwise, Yoga Sutra could have ended here by saying, okay, once you have achieved samadhi, then chitta-vritti nirodha has happened, you now achieve kaivalya. So the Patanjali Maharshi has to identify that it is not enough that we have achieved samyama. What do we do with that samyama? We have to do something with that. Once we have achieved discipline, that discipline has got to be applied. That application we will see in a moment. So the purity of buddhi in Yoga Shastra is the Sattva Shuddhi we are talking about. What it does is, it paves the way for the transcending of the trigunas. So you can see what is the process. In dharana, we get a control on tamas. In dhyana, we get a control on rajas. In samadhi, we become analogous to sattva-guna. So that is the mapping of trigunas with dhyana dharana samadhi, with dharana dhyana samadhi. Therefore, the next sutra 3.5 says, Tadjayat prajnalokaha. Tadjayat. The limitation of the previous sutra is leveraging one-pointed focus, which is dharana, making it into meditation, dhyana, then achieving samadhi, together becoming samyama. You have got to get a mastery of samyama. Tatajayat. Saying that a sporadic samyama is not adequate. Sometimes, depending on the intensity of a project or depending on the demands on us, we may get samyama. But as soon as the demand for that is lost, I'm sure, Raugaru, you can think of analogous situations in running a company also. See, there is some real challenge comes for the company. It could be a new taxation law. It could be any of that. Then you can see that everybody in the company, who are responsible, there will be a tremendous samyama. But as soon as the pressure is gone, then that samyama is lost. And therefore there is no... Mhm. Please. Yes, exactly. Every bhumi, and that bhumi also we will identify in a few minutes. In how systematically in each bhumi we have to do. Vasgaru? I think she is frozen, right? Or am I frozen? Are you able to listen here? Oh, okay. We will. It depends on whether every time you have achieved samyama and then when you come out of it, do you have to go back to the drawing board? So sometimes if you have to go back to the drawing board and start all over again, then we have not made any progress. Vasundhara Garu posted something on the chat. Yes, we can call it as Sabija Samadhi. Tajjayat prajnalokaha. Tajjaya, jaya or victory means that at every stage, at any point, samyama is available to us. So that means you don't have to worry about starting the process of dharana, dhyana, samadhi, because you are constantly in a state of dharana, dhyana, samadhi on any particular activity that we are going on in a given moment. That's what, a lot of times they say living in the present moment and such other paradigms are there. So prajna loka, we have got to parse it as prajna aloka. This is not some realm of prajna. Aloka means insight. Prajna means awareness. A person gets an insight into awareness, prajnalokaha tajjayat, that is the mastery of samyama on one object. The yogi attains both awareness and insight. It is because ordinarily, as Hari rightly mentioned, ordinarily our mind shifts from object to object, place to place. Even for the most disciplined minds, it happens. That's because of trigunas. Because of such constant shifting of the mind, it is impossible to penetrate deeply and fully into one thing. We may only scratch some surfaces, that is all. So to be able to completely and deeply established into something, all the three have to happen. That is, samadhi state must come, and one object must be in our prajna. So far we were talking about buddhi, but actually it must translate itself into prajna or insight. So the next question arises: What do we do with this prajna? So please note, dharana became dhyana. Dhyana became samadhi. The three of them became samyama. And by samyama we acquired sattva shuddhi. Sattva shuddhi is clarity of the buddhi. When the buddhi is perfected, now the buddhi has achieved prajnaloka. Aloka, insight of prajna, awareness. That is happening in buddhi. So what do you do with this prajna? Answer comes in Sutra number 6. Tasya bhumishu viniyoga. So samyama has to be applied in the various spheres, or it must be applied in the bhumis. So here, please go back to chapter 1, Sutra number 27, which talks about the 7 stages, 7 bhumis. Tasya saptadha pranta bhumihi prajna. So 127 is connected to 3.6. So what is happening in samyama when it has achieved a clarity of the buddhi, which is similar to the clarity of Purusha? What is the clarity of Purusha? Purusha has no chittavrittis. Purusha is in the state of samadhi. Now the buddhi has also come into the state of samadhi. And therefore Purusha, which is pure awareness, which shines upon an object and shows you that object. That is all. Buddhi is also shining on an object and simply revealing the object to you. Now, that revelation of pure revelation without asmita ragadvesha vinivesha has to be applied in the saptadha pranta bhumihi. Where the scripture is going is, it is only when you do that eventually you will achieve liberation. Because we still have to remove avidya. So for that sake, now we are doing the finding the use of prajna. So what does prajna do? Again we saw in chapter 1, Sutra 26, Sutra 27 talks about saptadha pranta bhumihi, the 7 stages. But in Sutra 26 it talks about it, gives a term called viveka khyatihi. In the chapter 1, use the viveka khyati and then discover it in the 7 bhumis. So now it is saying, now that viveka khyati or discriminative knowledge is thought, word and action. All the 3 together. Thought, word and action, which has been controlled by means of dharana, dhyana and samadhi, has got to be applied into the saptadha pranta bhumi. Let us see if we can simplify the 7 fields that was talked about in chapter 1. So we can say that we can start with the sharira samyama. We can get perfect samyama, dharana, dhyana, samadhi on our sharira. First bhumi. Second, indriya samyama. That is a total mastery on our sense organs. Prana samyama, of course, on our breathing. It can be mano samyama, control on the emotions. Every emotion that we get, we can actually do dhyana, dharana, samadhi. We can do a contemplation on a particular emotion, let us say anger. So you can have a total dharana on the concept of anger, how it arises, what are all the various parts of my personality it affects, how does it affect my body, how does it affect my mind, and how when I'm angry, I feel that my blood pressure is rising. There is a flushing of the face. All of those things can be visualized in dhyana. There, the one object that we are contemplating is anger. Similarly, we can also contemplate on something positive. It can be love, friendship. Worth doing in meditation. And then you get mano samyama. Then in buddhi samyama can be done. Then of course chitta samyama can be done. Finally atma samyama can be done. That is a totality of personality also can be done. That's the template. All of these can be achieved again only when we sequentially practice Ashtanga Yoga. First of all, yama niyama asana pranayama pratyaha. Yama, that is ahimsa satya asteya shaucha indriya parigraha. Niyama, yama and niyama, those 10 values will give mano samyama. Gives a control on our mind. Asana gives sharira samyama. Pranayama gives prana samyama. Pratyahara gives indriya samyama. Dharana gives atma samyama. Dhyana gives chitta samyama. Samadhi gives atma samyama. So you can see that is how we apply this jaya, this victory on this samadhi can be applied. So what is the practical solution? It is to go from the gross to the subtle. Is there a easier way? All this seems to be a lot of hard work. Can we design a very simple way where we can straight away achieve all these samyamas? For this, we go back to other scriptures such as the Upanishad and the Vedas. Why not we just do Ishvara Pranidhana? And Ishvara Pranidhana is not outside the purview of Yoga Shastra. By means of Ishvara Pranidhana, Puja and Archana of Ishvara, the same thing can be achieved. Now, what is puja? Puja actually indicates ritualistic worship. In ritualistic worship, when you actually sit and do puja, in that ritualistic worship, Sharira Samyama is automatically there. Because you have got to sit in a puja room. You sit in a comfortable posture, Asana Siddhi is there. Then you make the place clean. You empty your mind of everything other than your Aradhya Daiva, Ishtadevata. And every action, offering of flowers, waving of lamps, waving of incense sticks, offering Naivedya, everything is on one object only. Therefore, dharana is there. And you are chanting the mantras and slokas, knowing its meaning, therefore, dhyana is there. And you are not distracted, you don't go here and there, and therefore there is samadhi, and there is also the entire samyama is achieved, can be done by Ishvara Pranidhana also. What is the authority for me to say Ishvara Pranidhana can substitute the hard work that this Yoga Shastra is talking about? See Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, 46th verse. Yatah pravritti bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam svakarmana tamabhyarchya siddhim vindati manavaha. Yataha pravritti bhutanam. it is because of this Ishvara the creation has happened. The activities of the creation are happening. And this Ishvara is encompassing the entire universe. He is Antaryami, Sarvantaryami. And such Ishvara, Swakarmana tamabhyarchya, by means of worshipping that Ishvara, with all the activities we have, Manavaha Siddhim Vendati. A human being will achieve the same end. And therefore, when we do enthusiastically, wholeheartedly, cheerfully, when we discharge our duty, when karma yoga is practiced, karma is a bhumi for samyama. So when karma is a bhumi for samyama, karma translates itself into karma yoga. The reason is you have invested into a particular activity, dharana. Every component of a particular work you have paid attention to. That means there is an extraordinary discipline in executing every part of the karma. And we have not lost sight of the end product in this while we are executing the various products. So there is dhyana. And of course there is samadhi, in a total absorption in performing that job. And therefore you have achieved samyama. And in all these, what is happening? Asmita is not there, isn't it? Wherever there is samyama, there is no asmita. So when there is no asmita in karma, that is called karma yoga anyway. So what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is doing karma without worrying about the outcome, isn't it? So in the words of Yoga Shastra, we can say samyama on karma translates itself into karma yoga. When karma yoga is perfected, many vibhutis occur. Dharma Vyadopakhyana of the Aranya Parma of Mahabharata. Sometime back we have seen this story. What is the story? There was a very learned Brahmana by name Kaushika. And this Kaushika was an extraordinary learned in Vedas. So he was true to the role of a Brahmana. He was dedicated to the study and propagation of Veda. So one day he will be sitting under a tree and he will be doing the Veda Adhyayana. At that point of time, there was a bird sitting on top of the tree and it drops on him. So he had perfect samyama as far as karma of Veda Adhyayana is concerned. But he had not done the samyama on his manas, isn't it? And therefore he gets angry. So when he gets angry and he looks up at the bird, because of the vibhuti, the power that is accrued by means of his Veda Adhyayana, the bird burns down. So many stories say that he became very proud. Mahabharata, original Mahabharata, what it tries is, Kaushika, seeing that by staring at the bird out of anger, it fell down and died, got burnt immediately, he gets paschatapa. He is very, very sad. What is the use of my studying doing so much of Veda Adhyayana if my tapas is going to result in harming that poor innocent bird? So he has a great remorse. So he had to do a prayaschitta. So what is the prayaschitta? Prayaschitta is you go and beg for food. Because when you have to beg, we have to completely sublimate our ego, isn't it? How can you beg unless you completely give up ego? So he goes to this lady's house and says, Bhavati Vikshandehi. But still he has not overcome he has not attained samyama on krodha. So he has only attained samyama on the manas, on the body and the buddhi, but not on manas. So he gets upset that the housewife was giving more attention to her husband, and then only she comes to offer him food. And then he again stares angrily at the housewife. Then what is the vibhuti of the housewife? She says, I am not that bird to be burned down. Now what was the vibhuti of the housewife? The housewife's vibhuti was, she had actually done samyama on the karma of taking care of her family, and it had become karma yoga, and therefore in addition to sharira samyama, she had got buddhi samyama, she had got mano samyama, she had got chitta samyama, so that she can penetratively see the attitude of Kaushika. That is the vibhuti that this householder achieved. And of course later on she goes to Dharmavyadha, and until Dharmavyadha takes him home, Kaushika does not understand that the samyama has to be applied in Saptada Pranta Bhumi. Lot of times samyama people apply only in one area, in not all the 7 areas. When one employs it on all the 7 areas, you will get all these vibhutis. We may call it as intuition. So Dharmavyadha takes and then says, look, it is because my entire life centers around one single object, that is my old parents that I have got to serve and take care of them. And for that sake, I don't judge on what job I am doing. I may be a butcher. That's our hereditary karma. But I don't see anything in that. I'm just doing my karma. With Saptada Pranta Bhumi, I have applied my samyama, and therefore I can know all of these things. He gives an instruction in Mahabharata to Kaushika by saying, the dedication of serving my parents. So if any of the project, maybe it is our supporting our children, maybe our taking care of the children, our job, maybe our own personal life. But when we do that in all the Saptata Pranta Bhumi, it can be achieved. Yeshwara Pranidhana can be achieved. So the first Bhumi we can do is Yeshwara Pranidhana. The second Bhumi we can do is Swadhyaya, that is systematic study of the scripture. Swadhyaya and systematic study of scripture creates Buddhi Samyama. Gives a total Samyama on the Buddhi. Titiksha, that is endurance, Sukhe Dukkhe, Samaya Kritva, Labha Labho, Jaya Jayo, in all the dualities that affect our life, Samyama and controlling of our mind gives Mano Samyama, and so on. So we have got a choice depending on our ability. It can be Ishvara Pranidhana. For in the present context for all of us, my suggestion is the easiest and the most effective way of getting this Prajnalokaha is Ishvara Pranidhana. That will be the easiest emotionally satisfying, successful practice. We can also do samyama on the sense organs. There is a story in the Taittiriya Aranyaka. You know that the creator of the universe is Prajapati. And Prajapati had married a girl called Suparna. So the marriage of Prajapati and Suparna, in that marriage, they got a son. The son's name is Aruni. And this Aruni approaches his father and asks, what do you think is the highest path? What do you think is the highest goal of human life? Kim Bhagavantah Paramam Vadanti. Kim Bhagavantah Paramam Vadanti. Sir, Bhagavantah here means the learned people, sages. Kim Paramam Vadanti. What do they call as the highest? The highest realization is Brahman realization, Brahma Sakshatkara, right? But suppose Prajapati had told Aruni, his son, Brahma Sakshatkara is the highest, then he would not have understood what it is. So he says to son, let me give you one single project now to start with. The highest is Satyam. Satyam Param. Truthfulness is the highest. Then you also have to give an anecdotal evidence as to the power of truth. So he says, Satyena Vayuravati. Because of truth, the wind blows. Satyena Adityo Rochate. Because of truth, the sun shines. Divi Satyam Vachah Pratishtha. Noble, exalted, uplifting speech is established in truth. Tasmat Satyam Paramam Vadanti. Therefore, the sages say truth is the highest. So we will see that when samyama, that is dharana, dhyana, samadhi, dharana is examining truth, every component of the truth, every situation that the truth has to be exercised in extraordinary depth. Then when that happens, then look at the story of Satyavan Savitri. What is it that made Savitri win over even Yama? It is her truthfulness. So when truth is exercised also, one value of truth is exercised. That also becomes a perfect samyama, and prajnaloka takes place. In short, Vedavyasa summarizes all this. Yogena yogo jnatavyaha. Yogo yogat pravartate. Yaha apramattastu yogena sayoge ramate chiram. That is, yogena yogaha jnatavyaha. By means of yoga, yoga has to be known. So what is the first yoga? What is the second yoga? First yoga is dharana, dhyana, samadhi yoga. By yoking that samyama into a bhumi is the second yoga. First yoga is achieving samyama. Second yoga is applying that samyama into a bhumi. Yogena yogo jnatavyaha. In other words, yoga itself leads to yoga. Whoever is steadfast in yoga, apramattaha, without losing concentration, apramattaha, pramada means indifference, lack of concentration. Yoge ramate chirata, he will steadfastly delight in it. So again, coming back to a very simple but equally effective practice is Ishvara Pranidhana. Not that we must forget the rest. Because all that we have studied, that is dharana, dhyana, samadhi, achieving the samyama, all of them can be applied and employed in one single project instead of Saptadas Prantabhumi, 7 different locations. Let us focus on one. And that's not outside of Yoga Shastra because Ishvara Pranidhana is part of Kriya Yoga. So in Ishvara Pranidhana, we can focus with absolute Sharanagati to Ishvara and unswerving devotion. Nothing, no challenge should compromise our bhakti. When without all the intermediate stages, one can achieve the state of liberation. I think that is the best solution. Because we are not interested in other vibhutis that this chapter talks about. Clairvoyance, clairaudience. All those we are not interested. So what we are interested is manashanti. What we are interested is liberation. And therefore we can actually focus on complete grace, getting complete grace of Ishvara. When grace of Ishvara is there, why worry about other things? Ishvaranugraha not only assures moksha, it also assures that the devotee gets complete samyama. So from samyama, we do Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara Pranidhana translates itself into Ishvaranugraha. Ishvaranugraha gives us samyama, total samyama. Because when one has Ishvara's anugraha, which is one gets vision of God, then he can never have weakness of sharira, indriya, manas, buddhi, chitta. In all the dimensions, only one thing remains. In sharira, we see Ishvara. In our mind, we see Ishvara. In our buddhi, we see Ishvara. In chitta, we see Ishvara. And Ishvara being sarvantaryami, Ishvara being sarvashaktaha, how can there be weakness in us? Even when the body is old or sick, it is not weakness. It's just a natural state, that's all. It has to happen. The body will have to file someday. But that will not weaken the mind. In this context, please refer Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse number 32. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati. Atmaupamyena. Very important word. Atmaupamyena. Please note, we are not saying shariropamyena, that is like my sharira, everybody's sharira is. That's not the vision. It is like my ragadvesha, everybody's ragadvesha. That is also not. It is not my life force or an animal's life force. That is also not. Jivopamyanata. It is Atmaupamyena. From the perspective of Atman, Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yaha Arjuna. He who has got that equanimity, sukham va yadiva dukkham. Whether sukha or dukkha, his devotion to Ishvara is not compromised at all. That means the samyama is not disturbed. Dhyana is not disturbed. Dharana is not disturbed. Sayogi Paramo Mataha, says Krishna. He is the highest yogi. He sees himself in Ishvara, and Ishvara sees is in himself. So everything is Ishvara. My body is Ishvara, my thought is Ishvara, my buddhi is Ishvara. The world is Ishvara. That can be achieved only by means of Dhyana Dharana Samadhi. No compromise on Dhyana Dharana Samadhi. So what compromise I am proposing is the application of Samyama. Yoga Shastra says you apply Samyama in Saptada Pranta Bhumi. In 7 locations you do it. But suppose we follow the instruction of Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Shastra and an Upanishad, then we can actually turn towards God for grace. And Ishvara Pranidhana is also part of yoga philosophy, and therefore a person becomes free from moha, shoka, bhaya, chinta, which is the cause for avidya. So with this, a person also has overcome avidya. So how can we achieve that state of Ishvara Pranidhana? So let's take a metaphor. Consider that I am a slab of stone. And this slab of stone has to be chiseled into a murti. So we have to have this shilpi, or we have to have this sculptor. And that sculptor is Ishvara, the Ishtadevata. And what that Ishtadevata, that sculptor does is, he makes me do karma yoga, swadhyaya, tapas, Ishvara Pranidhana. Each one of these is the hammer and chisel. And at the end, this murti will come out of me, who has been an inert slab. So therefore, yat karoshi yadashnasi, yad juhoti dadhasi yat, yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you do, yat karoshi, whatever you consume, yadashnasi, whatever you think, yat tapasyasi, all of that, say that you are doing it as Ishvara Pranidhana. Yadyat karma karomi akhilam shambhota varadhanam. All of this. So then samyama, dharana, dhyana can also achieve the value structure of satya, etc. Such samyama, even if you have to take another birth, our scriptures say the next birth will be an exalted birth. Mahanarayana Upanishad says, because a human being in a past life completely concentrated on Satyam, in this creation he is Vayu. Because a human being in a previous birth totally focused on Satya, that is the sun, Surya today. This is the Veda Vakya. And thus, even our next Janma can also be purified by Ishvara Pranidhana for our times. More we'll see in our next class.